Do you want to take the UK caller?
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know how to say their name.
Amir into the chat.
Amir?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Amir.
Hi, girls. How are you both doing?
Good.
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm not too shabby, thank you. How are you both?
We are doing all right.
Great. In the first instance, I have to say that the first caller, his closing words were bloody weird, nothing short of it, and it was a very well-handled call on your part.
Yes, please refrain from asking us out at the end of this call.
And also just wanted to say thank you for standing up and sympathising with the plight of people in Gaza. That's a matter that really hits home, that really hits close to my heart. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Every day is a fucking horror over there, so it's easy to do.
Absolutely. So I can see that I'm quite renowned now in the chat, and everyone, I mean, based on my conversation with Ara and Ra yesterday, they had a certain impression of me. And I just
looked at the chat.
Looking. Yeah.
Yeah, look, my energy and my tonality matches the person that I'm debating with, Aaron Ra. You guys might already know this. He's a very fierce opponent, and I felt that I was getting consistently interrupted in that debate, which is why I had to up the tone a little bit. But you guys seem a lot more chilled, civilized, so hopefully this can be a healthy discourse and we can, unpack some things that are at the core of my argument. And, I'm hoping to present my version of the contingency argument to you both and seeing what we can make of it.
Okay.
Sure.
Cool. Well, without further ado, so I'm going to just present my premises for the contingency argument, which I guess is going to be of benefit to everyone as well in the room, and the conclusion that I lead from that. So yeah, without further ado, and at any point as well, just feel free to interject. We can discuss certain premises in more detail. So, starting with premise one, I was going to say, along the lines of that, no system can be the sole cause of its own existence without falling into circular reasoning. It requires an external explanation. I don't know, just as a book can't explain who wrote it without referring to an author, a system can't explain its own creation without pointing beyond itself. And premise two would be natural processes are part of the universe's system and first cannot account for the system's origin.
So wait, sorry. So for premise one, let's take them like kind of one at a time as best we can. So there's no system without circular reasoning. Like you have to refer to the system itself to be able to explain it. What would be an example of that for you?
Sorry, how do you mean?
What would be an example of how you were describing your first premise of how there is circular reasoning for all systems?
No, I was saying that no system could be the sole cause of its own existence without falling into circular reasoning, that it requires or demands an external explanation.
So do you want to give an example of this so we can get, first of all, a clearer idea, and also that makes it easier to, I don't know, discuss?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think I mentioned that a book can't explain who wrote it without referring to an author. A system can't explain its own creation without pointing beyond itself.
So is this sort of in reference to how like the universe was created, that we can't explain our creation without pointing to an author of that creation?
Yeah, so essentially that natural processes are part of the universe's system and thus cannot account for the system's origin. And so explaining the universe's origin requires either an external cause or a foundational assumption of self-existence.
I understand what you're saying, and I don't know that that's proof for any God existing. Like I do believe that the Big Bang is the best theory that we have, that atoms collided. Atoms are always kind of flying around, and so it makes sense that at some time the atoms that collided would have collided and created this situation, and everything else has been a result of it evolving based on what the collided atoms created. So that doesn't feel right to me. Like I think where we will have a divide is where you're explaining a divine author. I would explain a kind of coincidence. Like the atoms collided because the atoms were at some point bound to collide. And really, we don't need a reason for why they collided. They just did. And for you, your reasoning there would be a divine source. And for me, I don't feel like that is a reason that doesn't resonate with me at all.
Yeah, okay, so just maybe a couple of points there. At this stage, outlining premises 1 and 2, I haven't actually got to any sort of conclusion that God is the best explanation as to why anything at all exists. That there on your part, I believe, would be a leap of faith. But getting to your other point about, the reason that atoms of so-and-so just collided, it's just because they did it. You take it as a brute fact. I would say to that point that claiming that the universe was just, in this case, that atoms colliding is a brute fact it's arbitrary and it's improvable. I would say that a self-existent God provides a more coherent explanation because God's nature, unlike atoms colliding, is defined as necessarily existent and not contingent.
I still don't. I think move forward with your points, because I think you're right. I want to hear the conclusion. And I also don't think that, but many times when I have these conversations with theists, it's like, I don't know, therefore God, which is not enough reason for me. For me, the reason is I don't know, so I don't know. And that's that. But I'm curious to hear the rest of your points and see how they all tie together into a conclusion.
Sure, absolutely. And hopefully I'll just make a very quick prefix there. This is not a God of the gaps argument. It is a philosophical train of thought that is underpinned by logic. So premise 3, which I think actually is something that most atheists accept, is that if we're looking to explain the origins of the universe, then it either requires an external cause or a foundational assumption of self-existence. Now, for most atheists, they would just say that the universe exists as a brute fact and we wouldn't have to invoke a God. And that's where usually the point of contention comes. Now, in all of this, there are some, let's call it, foundational assumptions, some problems with having a foundational assumption of an eternal universe. And we come across various philosophical issues such as traversing infinity. So the way that atheists commonly tend to avoid this point is that they would infer to an infinite past, that the universe is eternal and therefore we don't have to appeal to a creator because the universe has always existed. And to that point, I would say that an infinite past cannot logically lead to the present because infinity has no end. And maybe another way of paraphrasing it is that an infinite past defies coherence, as there is no starting point to reference, making concepts like adding nonsensical. Maybe one other way of even rephrasing this is that, an eternal past lacks a first cause, leading to an infinite regress, a regress that violates causality. And so the way that I'm approaching this is by trying to illustrate the absurdities of an eternal past. I'm trying to add credence to the fact that there must have been a starting point.
So I my thought while you were explaining all of this, and I was taking notes and being an active listener, and my thought while you were explaining all of this is kind of echoing what we talked about with Anthony, which is if a God exists and the life that he has created for us, and I'm going to speak from the Catholic or Christian God because that's what I know, and I'm not sure if that's the one you're referring to. If this God exists and he has created this system where I've given you this book, this is basically an open book test. I've given you this book, read all of this information. If you do the things that I requested of you, you will have eternal life. If it were that cut and dry and that simple, why would we need to have this level of debate around it? Like, this is a person who has been able to create all things. He is powerful enough to create all things, including an integration of our free will. And yet we have to go through this process of, well, if we are not sure of who the author is, therefore God. If we have to look for outside influences for the origin of the universe, therefore God. Why can a person who allegedly has immense power, the most powerful being that exists, why can he not at any point in modern history, now especially now that we have recorded history, why has he never proven his existence in an irrefutable way? Why do we have to go through an entire rigmarole just dissecting everything at a level that is like, that is so elevated? Why would that be like a perfect like you would think that he would create a perfect system because that's what he is capable of, and yet, here we are.
It's a very good question. I will respond to that question in one moment, but in the first instance, I'm just going to point out that I feel like you're moving the goalpost because I was providing an argument from contingency as to why the existence of God is plausible, and what you have done is that you have now reduced it as to say, well, if we grant that a God exists, then someone who has, immense power, why can't he has never proven his existence in a very overtly obvious way?
So I'll tell you, I don't think that it is. The reason is because, is a God plausible? Maybe. I am open to believing that if one day God were to appear in a way where it was irrefutable to me that he existed, I would be like, okay, there is a God. And I would, it's plausible. My point is that, and the reason why I don't believe is because I don't think that it's true at this time. It's like, is it plausible that, that if I get a motorcycle and I mean, this is like kind of a shitty example, but it's the first one that's coming to my head. Is it plausible that if I get a motorcycle and I ride it every single day on a highway, that I will never get into an accident and I will be totally fine? Yeah, that's plausible. But like, I also don't want to get a motorcycle because it's also a possibility that I will have a really terrible end with that motorcycle. Like, just because something is plausible doesn't mean that it is the only option. And then we go through the process of like basing our entire life and our lifestyle and our ethics and our morals based on the plausibility of something existing.
Sure, but if something is plausible, I think we would both agree that it is likely. If I say, for example, to your point, it is plausible that if you get on a motorcycle, you will have an accident, you would interpret that as saying it is likely that I will have an accident. So when I say that God's existence is plausible, I'm saying that it is likely. I'm not talking in absolute or definite terms. I'm just making statistical, probabilistic claims here. Now,
but that
I can also
plausible and likely don't feel the same to me. Those are not the same thing.
Sure. I mean, on a deeper level of semantics, we can make that distinction. But for practical purposes, you can say that the terms are almost synonymous. For example, again, just to what I said, if I said that
no, but I would disagree that they're. I would disagree that they're synonymous because even in using the example of the motorcycle again, you could say it's plausible that you'll get into an accident, and the reason why you value that plausibility is because you're doing a risk-benefit analysis. The risk for me in that situation outweighs the benefit of looking really cool on a motorcycle. But for some people, the benefit will outweigh the risk. Such is the way that we process plausibility. It's not that it's likely, it's that it's plausible. So you can do a risk-benefit analysis and decide. So in the same way, when I look at the plausibility of God existing and I do a risk-benefit analysis, I don't like what I'm looking at. And so I'm not going to refute that there is plausibility that he exists, but at this time, the plausibility is not enough of a benefit. It doesn't provide enough of a benefit for me to engage with the risk.
Right. Okay. Just so I can understand. I mean, I don't want to get hung up here on trivial semantics, and I'm happy to even replace the word plausible with likely if it adds credence to the point that I'm trying to make here. But just take these two statements here. Alyssa, I think it is plausible that if you get on that motorbike, you're going to have an accident. Versus Alyssa, I think if you get on that motorbike, it is likely that you're going to have an accident. How would you say that those two statements differ in terms of its overarching meaning?
Because one is saying it's just possible in general, and the other one is saying it's likely. Those just are not the same.
Right. So we're saying that the word likely here carries with it a higher degree of certainty than the word plausible.
Yes, I think so.
But issued in that way, in the way that the sentence is formulated, if let's just say your mum says, Alyssa, if you get on that motorbike, it is plausible that you're going to have an accident. Do you genuinely, hand on heart, think that she means there's a slight possibility that you're going to have an accident, or do you think she means that there is a high likelihood that you're going to have an accident?
Well, I think if she were trying to communicate to me the risk, if she were trying to communicate to me, this is a risk that you are going to get. There's a significant risk that you are going to get into an accident, and me as a mom, I'm going to demonstrate my concern because I want you to be safe. I would never use the word plausible. I would use something closer to likely. Like if it were my actual mom, she'd be like, Alyssa, you're an idiot. You're going to get into an accident. Get off the bike. It would not be, you wouldn't say plausible, because that doesn't demonstrate the thing that you're trying to demonstrate.
If somebody said something was plausible to me, I would think that means they're saying there's a chance, and it doesn't say anything about the likelihood of that chance at all. It just means
I agree.
There is a chance.
I agree. I think we're all in agreement here. I think the word itself also is context specific, and that can also give you a better idea of how plausible or how likely something is. But I want to go back to one of the points that you made before. I think it was you, Elise, that made the point that if God is someone who has immense power, then why can't he, throughout modern history, why has he never proven his existence in an obvious way? And I think that's a really, really good question. And to that point, I want to say that you don't always need an explanation of something if it's the best explanation that we have, because again, you'll end up going down the route of infinite regress. And I'll give you an analogy. Like, let's just say, for example, if all three of us were taking a stroll in some really far away distant planet, and we, between us, came across a very sophisticated artifact, like it was so fucking sophisticated, then between the three of us, we could conclude that the best explanation for this artifact are probably extraterrestrials. Now, we don't need to know who those extraterrestrials are, where they've come from, or what their motive is in order to conclude that the best explanation for this artifact is extraterrestrials. And I can give other kind of analogies like this. So the point that I'm trying to drill here is that we don't always need an explanation of something if it's the best explanation that we have. Otherwise, we go down the route of infinite regress. Now, well, before I continue, I'll first ask you both, what are your thoughts on that?
I personally would never think it's aliens, so I'm having a hard time with this. Like, I would never make an assumption about something like that that doesn't already exist in our world. Like, my first instinct would be to associate it with something that we know exists. My it I just wouldn't assume it was something supernatural or aliens or anything like that.
So what explanation could you possibly fathom for coming across a very sophisticated artifact on a distant planet? I know it's a out there hypothetical situation.
Oh, you said on a different planet?
I mean, I can give you an example that brings it back down to earth, if you like. So let's just say, for example, I don't know, you go out in your backyard, your garden, and you start digging a hole, and you continue to dig, and you come across some clay pots and some spearheads, etc. You would probably infer that the best explanation for those clay pots and those spearheads was that once upon a time, an ancient civilization used to reside here. But you wouldn't need to know who that ancient civilization was, where they came from, what their motives were, etc., to conclude that the spearheads and whatnot that you found came from an ancient civilization. So you don't always need an explanation of something if it's the best explanation that you have.
Are you familiar with the watchmaker fallacy? That's what the conversation that you're engaging in now. Have you heard of this before?
Yeah, and this is not a watchmaker fallacy, but you can tell me what you think it is.
The reason I think it is because the watchmaker fallacy is you're saying because there is a design, there must be a designer. That is literally what it is. And I feel like that's sort of the conversation we're having, where it's not, I understand what you're saying, where because there is a design, it is plausible that there is a designer. However, plausibility is not enough. It's not enough. And even in the case of you find this artifact and you don't know where it came from, can you make a conclusion that it's an alien? Can you make a conclusion that it's an ancient civilization? When we find things as human beings that we cannot find the root of, what we do is we search until we find an answer. And sometimes, if not all of the time, we do. And there are very few truly unexplained things that happen or that exist. And so I feel like that is also a reason why I have a hard time getting on board with this thought process, because I don't really find many things in this world to be so unexplainable, therefore God.
Sure. Now, just to that point, I would say that the reason why this is not a watchmaker fallacy is because in both instances of the analogies that I've given, whether it's coming across spearheads and clay pots in your back garden versus a very sophisticated artifact, you could say with a very high degree of probability that it is not something that has miraculously came about through natural processes. It is more likely, again, it's a statistical claim, it is more likely that it was the result of someone who created it, not God in this instance.
Yeah, but because we have evidence, we have other evidence to tell us that clay pots that look like this, that were found in this area, they were made by this group of people in this period of time. So we have reason to believe those things.
Exactly, we do. So then why are you accusing me of saying that it's a watchmaker fallacy?
Because we have no reason to believe that there is a God to create anything. The reason why when we find like clay pots and we're able to date them is because we have proof. We have no proof of a God. So they're not the same.
But what I was trying to illustrate there is that you don't always need an explanation of an explanation if it's the best explanation that you have. So when you was asking,
in what circumstance is the best explanation ever God? I have not found that.
Well, for example, when I was debating the contingency argument at the start, I was trying to point out the absurdities of things like an eternal past. that wasn't something that we debated to its entirety, and why God is a much better explanation as to why anything at all exists, rather than appealing to natural processes.
Hasn't God always existed? Do you not believe that God has always existed? What's the difference there between the universe always existing and God has always existed?
Well, when we talk about God being
who created God? Who created God?
Well, when we talk about questions like who created God, it's not a question that applies as such, because God is not a slave to time. Space, time, matter, and energy
you understand. You're doing some special pleading. Then you've decided that the rule doesn't apply to God, but it does apply to the universe.
No, it's not. It's not special pleading. You see, again, this was back in premise 2 that I said that natural processes are part of the universe's system and thus cannot account for the system's origin. And so to explain the universe's origin requires an external cause or a foundational assumption of self-existence. You see, look, the universe demonstrates characteristics of contingency. Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. I just completely reject that it's okay for God to have existed forever, but not the universe. I just completely reject that in general. I think that doesn't make any sense. I think we came up with the concept of God so we can say that, but it doesn't really mean anything to me, because we don't know that. We don't know that like that rule is okay for God, but it wouldn't apply to the universe. We just simply do not know if that's true.
Well, we can arrive at that conclusion through 2 ways. We can first arrive at it through philosophy. Hopefully I can try to persuade you. I mean, the first one is the general consensus amongst the scientific community is that the universe had a starting point, that was the Big Bang. And that was the point at which space, time, matter, and energy all came into creation. I agree that there's going to be a handful of scientists out there that propose more radical theories that it has always existed, but for the most part, that is the cosmological agreement that those things came into creation at the point of the Big Bang. The second one is, again, just following the chain of thought with the contingency argument. You see, look, the universe, it demonstrates characteristics of contingency. It changes, it depends on physical laws, and could conceivably have been different. And this requires an explanation outside itself. In contrast, God is posited as necessary by nature, existing independently of external factors. And a necessary being explains the existence of contingent realities because it must exist in all possible worlds, whereas the universe does not exhibit the same necessity. This makes God, rather than the universe, a much better likely candidate for an uncaused cause.
I just do not agree with that.
You're losing me a little bit with the contingency agreement. I'm not really understanding what you're saying here, like what you're trying to demonstrate, because it still feels like a we don't know therefore God argument to me, and I feel like I'm either missing it or not understanding it, or that's what's happening here.
Could I ask you kindly to try to steelman my argument? Could you tell me what your understanding of the contingency argument is, and then perhaps we can clear up any confusion?
For all of this to work, wouldn't we have to know like everything about the universe, and we don't?
I was asking you to steelman my argument. Or rather just steelmanning the contingency argument.
What I'm understanding is we don't understand, therefore God. That's what I'm understanding. So you asked me to explain the contingency agreement that I'm understanding. What I'm understanding is what you're describing is, because we don't have answers to every single thing, we fill in the gaps with God, and then suddenly it exists. It makes sense. Sorry, not it exists. It makes sense.
I'll ask the question again, because I think what you're saying doesn't really get to the crux of it. What is your, and it's the contingency argument, not the contingency agreement. Hopefully we'll all come to an agreement.
But if I'm not understanding, then I need you to, if I'm not understanding, then you need to explain it to me. Explain it to me. Simpler, slower, get rid of the word salad. What is it? What is it that you're trying to describe? Because I'm feeling like it's a lot of like, I feel like there's also, a lot of word salad around what you're saying.
But this is the thing, though. This is the thing. Just off the bat, do you both have any understanding of what the contingency argument is, irrespective of what I've said? If someone had asked you both, what is your understanding of the contingency argument? How
this is not a quiz. Explain.
Yes.
This is not a quiz.
Yes. You're saying everything in the universe is contingent on something, but because you think that, that doesn't mean that the universe itself is contingent on something. We don't know that. We have no idea if that's true. That's what I'm getting at.
It's exactly what I've been saying.
But
it's exactly what I've been saying.
We don't have anything for that.
It's exactly what I've been saying, Amir. You are taking this idea of contingency and filling in all of the gaps where you cannot find the reason. And you are applying God. You are filling in the gaps with God because it feels comfortable. It makes sense to you. That doesn't mean it's true. It might mean for you that it's plausible. It can be plausible if that's where you want to go with it. But that doesn't mean that it's true. And that is not a reason enough for me to accept it.
So to Taylor's point, first and foremost, do you therefore think, Taylor, that there is an infinite chain of contingent things, or do you think that there is a starting point, so to speak, and that starting point is the universe and we don't have to invoke a God? Or indeed, is it something else that you are advocating?
It's a boring answer, but I genuinely don't know, and I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend to know if there was a beginning or if it always existed or anything, because I genuinely don't think we know that. So I don't, like I said to Anthony, I don't really see the point in guessing. I just don't find that satisfying in any kind of way.
But there are some things that we can ascertain just through logical inquiry. For example, that the universe cannot be eternal.
We don't know that. Like, you keep saying that, but we do not know that. Like, we know, like, that just doesn't make sense to me. There's no proof of that.
There's proof. I mean, mathematicians across the board and a lot of mainstream physicists would agree, and cosmologists agree that infinities cannot exist in the real world.
How do they know that? If you're saying that mathematicians and physicians say that, how do they know?
Well, you see, look.
If you were to ask them,
we can derive it both in terms of just philosophical. I'll give you an example.
Mathematicians are not going to lean on philosophy. Mathematicians are not going to lean on philosophy. So if that is something that they really believe, that means that they have proof based on other things to believe that that may be true. That's where these things are not going to be the same. Your proof is not proof. It is faith. It is, I believe that everything is dependent on something else. And because I don't know what the universe was dependent on, therefore God. And that's not proof. That is faith. And that's fine, but that's not proof.
Well, we have mathematical proofs as to why there can't be an infinite past. And you can think of it in terms of
okay, great. So we have mathematical proof. That's exactly what I was saying. They had proof. We don't have proof of God. If they have proof of the universe not existing forever, great. Fine. Then there's proof of it. There is no proof that God created this universe.
Also, wouldn't that tell you that it's likely, if you're saying that they can prove that, wouldn't that also lead you to believe that God couldn't have always existed as well?
No, because that goes back to the point that God is outside of space and time. So,
but we just assign that to him. We just assign that to him. We just say that. It doesn't mean anything.
we assign it to him by a matter of necessity, because we are saying that there has to be a necessary foundation as to why all contingent things exist.
But so if we are assigning it out of necessity, that means you are literally backfilling the gaps of things that you don't understand with God. This is exactly what I've been saying on this whole call, is you don't have the answers, and you backfill it with God fits the bill. But God is something that human beings, in my opinion, created. So yeah, you can create this omnipresent being that is the reason why we have all of these things happen. And of course, it's going to look perfect because we created it. We designed it to be perfect. And there is no, what is the difference? If I tell you that I believe, if you've ever spoken to Promise, I'm sure she used this analogy with you. Why can't I say there is a pink unicorn and she has been around since the beginning of time and she created the world, and actually originally the world was pink and then it started to evolve and then it became what it is now. Like, I can do that too. I can make something up and then backfill all of it into the gaps where we don't have knowledge.
The problem with a pink unicorn is that a pink unicorn has parameters in that it is made up of matter. It is made up of energy.
No, unicorns are not real. Unicorns are not real. They do not exist, so they can be whatever I say it is. So if I'm telling you that a pink unicorn is omnipresent.
Cool, then what you're describing here is God. You're essentially conceding that God exists, but it happens to be a pink unicorn.
No, but my pink unicorn does not subscribe to the Bible. My pink unicorn did not send a person down. My pink unicorn thinks that abortion is totally fine. My pink unicorn, I can do this for days. Why is what you are describing to me, it feels more and more clear that what you're describing to me is human beings did not have answers for things. And so what they did was they created a perfect way to backfill everything that we didn't know. So in the same way, actually, this might be a good example. There was probably a period of time where when people had a cold and we did not have an understanding of what the common cold was, if people were to, at some point, heal from this cold, and every single day they prayed and prayed and prayed to their God to heal them from this cold, and they do finally heal from the cold, that person at that time would say, this is a miracle. God granted this to me. But we know now that it was just a cold. And if you had enough fluids, you had enough rest, you had enough water, and your immune system was in a good place, you would heal from that cold. This is exactly what I feel like you're doing.
I don't feel like I'm doing that at all. And I agree, going back maybe 100 years ago, if someone had the cold and they prayed to God, they would believe that God is the reason why they were healed. But that's completely disingenuous to the point that I'm making. Can I approach this in another way? And if we don't make any progress on this, I'm happy to kind of draw the line. I just kind of want to look at it more from a psychological perspective. And what I mean by that is this is true for atheists as well, but it's also, the case that we have a lot of very highly intelligent people, like both yourselves as well. I regard you both as intellectual heroes, and a lot of credit to you both. Indeed, there are also incredibly intelligent people that believe in God who are intellectually persuaded that God is, a very, I don't want to use the word plausible here for all the reasons that we discussed before, but God's existence is highly likely, and they're intellectually persuaded by that. I just want to ask you both a question. For people that are highly intelligent, even more intelligent than all three of us, why do you think that they are so deeply convinced in the existence of God? Like, what is it that...
Because you can be highly intelligent and fear death. You can be highly intelligent and fear dying and what happens afterwards. Religion has nothing to do with intelligence and everything to do with faith and fear. The entire system of religion relies on the fear of damnation and the fear of not going to heaven. and you will do anything to have that not be your reality. So you can be extremely intelligent and still be extremely fearful. And also to that point, Amir, for as long as religion has existed, people have had counter arguments to it. And for as long as we've been doing, even let's just like limit it to our time on the line, we have had people with varying degrees of intelligence. We also have people who debate the existence of God in many different platforms with many different highly intelligent people, and we have yet to find irrefutable evidence of God. And so sometimes, and I hope you don't take offense to this because I don't mean it to be offensive, but I do think that sometimes when there are callers who call into this show or decide that they want to take on this task, I think, what arrogance do people have to think that they are the one person on this earth? God, I hope that they write a book, do a TED Talk, tour the world with this information because they think they've found the irrefutable evidence. You know what I mean? Like how have we gone this far in any of this work?
I agree. I mean, look, I don't think we'll ever find irrefutable evidence for the existence of God. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these dialogues right now. I would make 2 points to what you said. The first one is there is a distinction, I guess, between religion and the belief in God. I'm not religious myself. I don't subscribe to any religious denomination. I'm not Christian. I'm not Muslim. And for all the reasons why you guys criticize other callers, I'm on your side there. I don't believe in religion, but I believe in God. So I think it's unfair of you to say that the belief in God requires you to be religious, or at least alluding to that. You may not have said it verbatim. The second thing is, do you genuinely think that all of the intellectual people who are at the forefront of theism believe in God because they fear dying? Is that really, really the root cause of why they believe these things?
I think, number one, no matter how intelligent you are, you could have some blind spots or maybe believe in things that aren't exactly provable. But I think it's maybe easy for extremely intelligent people to believe in God because, like I said earlier, we don't have all the answers. So if they want to continue to put God in those areas where we don't have answers, they can do that. Because they're not denying any kind of proof. But I also want to say that things like a lot of intelligent people in our past who believed in God, even when they like got into their careers and stuff, they were born into that religion. Indoctrination is one hell of a drug, so it just wouldn't be shocking to me if they were holding on to that for cultural reasons, or they genuinely believed it since they were little, so they're going to continue to believe it, and they haven't seen anything to convince them otherwise.
Really, really good points. 3 really good points there. And to that, I would say the exact really good points that you've made there can also apply to atheists. You made the point that you can have some blind spots no matter how intelligent you are. I agree to that, 100%. Do you therefore agree that you can also have some blind spots? The second point that you made is they don't have all the answers. Does that therefore mean that you have all the answers? You probably don't have all the answers. You might also have some blind spots.
No, but we've said that we don't have answers. We've said over and over in this call we don't have answers.
Sure, but you can have blind spots, right? No matter how intelligent you are. So
sure, of course you can.
Now, exactly. So therefore, if you agree, if we all agree that collectively all of us can all have blind spots and not just single out theists, and atheists can also have blind spots, do you therefore think there is a chance that those blind spots that you both have could also be the reason why you're restricted in believing that God's existence could actually be likely?
I told you that it's plausible.
Yeah, there could be things that...
Sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, I was just going to say, I feel like there are things maybe I couldn't see as evidence that someone else would say it's evidence, but the fact is we don't have like solid proof. So there's no kind of proof that I'm actively denying or rejecting. I'm just not accepting something without proof. That's all that's happening. And I don't consider rejecting something that doesn't have proof to be a blind spot because there's nothing to turn a blind spot to. There is no proof to have the blind spot for.
But the theist would turn around and say that there is proof. This is what I can see, or rather, this is the evidence that I can see. Why can't you see it? This is your blind spot, but it's not my blind spot. But you can equally turn. But you can equally turn around and say, well, no, that is not evidence. That is your blind spot. So in fact, what we actually end up getting down to is epistemology. What actually makes something more likely than unlikely? What makes something more true than untrue? It becomes epistemology. God, that's a hard word to pronounce. Yeah. I wanted to make one last side point as well about indoctrination being one hell of a drug. So true. And I would say, in fact, to that, a lot of religious people, irrespective of how intelligent they are, adopt their beliefs because of how they were brought up. That is absolutely true. I would also say as well to that level of indoctrination is also true to atheists as well, especially with communities that exist, especially when you make careers out of it as well. There's going to be that level of indoctrination.
Not all of
and
us,
it's also true for...
all of us found atheism separately. Like, we all found it for different reasons, and I don't think any of us were indoctrinated. I think the main difference, Amir, that I feel in the way that atheists function and the way that people of faith function is there's always going to be this little gap in it where the faith lives, right? Like, part of being religious is believing without proof. It is, I believe that God exists, even if I don't see, feel, whatever, him. For an atheist, we have decided that that is not enough. The truth matters more than a leap of faith. And so for us, unless there is proof that this is what is true, I have no reason to take that leap of faith. Like, to what end? To what benefit? I'm okay with not knowing the answers to things.
And I would criticize any theist who believes in God without proof. That's the distinction that I would make between believing in God with faith and believing in God with blind faith, right? There is, of course, going to be that element.
But what proof does anyone have? Like, that's why we have this show. That's why we take calls over and over, is we're looking for any proof, and we have yet to find any of it. So all of it is believing without proof.
Yeah, and that's where I am bringing it down to something more deeply rooted in psychology, because what a lot of theists see as proof, atheists do not see as proof. And this is why these debates continue to go on. And we've all acknowledged collectively that we all have blind spots, right? So this actually becomes something much more nuanced in psychology. And this is why I think maybe, and you know what, actually, through this conversation, and I thank you both, maybe being a strong theist or being a strong atheist probably isn't the most intellectually honest viewpoint or position to have. Maybe just being a flat out agnostic or, just somewhere in the middle is probably the best place to be on this matter.
And I'm happy to be that. I don't care. Like, whatever the label is, I don't really care. Sorry, Taylor. I feel like you've been wanting to...
No, it's okay. I also want to ask if you think it says anything that, at least I know the statistics in the United States. I don't know about the world. I think it's maybe harder to get those stats. But in the United States, only about 4% of people join Christianity if they weren't raised in it. And when it comes to people who grow up in religion and end up leaving and becoming atheist, the statistic is way higher. Like 70% of atheists are raised religious. Do you think that says something about that? Like, in terms of indoctrination and stuff and how that works?
Bloody good question. Really good question. To that point, I would say that it's very nuanced. You see, for example, atheists, when they're debating against theists represent so many different positions. A theist can be a Muslim, they can be a Christian, they can be, a Sikh, a Hindu, etc. So the amount of ammunition an atheist has to take down a theist is a lot greater, and therefore the perceived perception of atheism is going to be more intellectually superior, which is why when you look at places like YouTube, a lot of these YouTube shorts, etc., they're very convincing, because when there's some, dumbfounded Muslim person saying that Prophet Muhammad flew to the moon on a winged horse. That is stupid. And the perception, therefore, of believing in God appears to be stupid, right? And we can all agree on that. So it's a very fucking stupid claim to make. So to your point, it is very nuanced. I think there's a very small cohort of arguments for the existence of God separate to religion that I think are very intellectually persuading, which a very small cohort of people like myself also believe in. These are not the sort of debates that are publicized on places like YouTube. They're not very entertaining. You know, I think on my last call yesterday, Luxander said that these debates are more for performance reasons, you know, they're for entertainment reasons, and really intellectually challenging debates. They're not entertaining. You can also see that on your own chat. I would say that out of all of the conversations that you...
I don't think that that's true across the board. I think when we have conversations where we actually are like in this conversation, I guess this, whatever. There have been many times where we have shows where we are actually not debating anyone at all. And I look in the chat and the feedback that we get is, this was a really great show. Like, this was really nice. So I understand why the debate is part of the entertainment, but I think it's not fair to say that it being part of the entertainment is because you need because the intelligent argument is not entertaining enough. I don't think that's true. That's when you really get to be dueling with it, where it's sort of like, going back and forth and really feeling like we're in a spirited debate. We're being able to like have counterpoints for each other. So I don't think that's true. And yeah, I think where we're going to have a disconnect is even like on the psychological front. Of course, psychologically, it feels better to have God be a part of your life. Like there have been many times where people have called and said that, Promise and I had an entire phone call where someone spent the entire thing trying to convince us that if we were Republicans, we would be happier. And we didn't disagree with them. It's the same thing. It's like, it doesn't feel like living in truth. It feels like living in ignorance to me. It's like kind of the same deal. So I understand the psychological perspective of like, if you are, that people are psychologically maybe more inclined to believe in God because it feels good and it gives them answers. Like, that makes sense to me, but that doesn't mean it's true. And that's the biggest thing that absolutely. We are constantly looking for here is, what is the truth? And in reality, like, I guess I would prescribe more to being agnostic. I don't know. And to be perfectly honest, I don't really care that much. Like, it doesn't affect my life in any way it only positively affects my life to no longer have the burden of a God. Like, that was only a burden to me. So to have that be released from my life feels great. So I don't know.
Yeah. I would say this much as well. Just through these conversations that I've had with the line, I'm participating more so because I find these questions to be very pressing. You two as debaters have been incredibly respectful, and I really like the way that the discourse has unfolded. Just out of morbid curiosity, do you have other callers waiting to join the line? Because if so, I'll give them the opportunity to speak.
Are there any, sorry, what was your question? Are there any other callers on the line?
Waiting to join the line.
There aren't, because we're at the end of the show, actually. So you are our last caller, and then we'll wrap and call it a night. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like to think they save the best till last. Right. Well, look, I'm going to just kind of part. I'm going to part ways, not in some cringy way that Anthony did. I'm going to really say that I respect both of you genuinely, and that comes from like a place of pure respect. You guys have been wicked debaters.
Thank you.
Really wish the best for both of you. And I'll say goodbye to the chat. I'm not a troll at the chat. I'm not here to troll. Please don't conflate me as a troll. And I wish the best for everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amir.
Have a good
night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. So, okay, here's a thing that I feel like I've learned with callers like Amir, because I know he is that a stress, like, what is that? A s'more?
It's a s'more, and I should have had it this whole time. What the hell? I put it here for a reason.
Really cute.
Next time,
really cute.
Next time the s'more will come out.
Yeah. What I think with people like Amir is sometimes, and this is more of a reflection of me and how I process things more than anything else, when people are getting really into, and this is why my first question to him was, if this is true, why do we have to go through this whole, like, all of this very complicated reasoning? You're throwing like a lot of vocabulary, a lot of like philosophical and what's it called? Like all of these like debate things, like there's yeah, like it's the word salad, it's the theories, it's the whatever. And when it gets to that point, I get sort of like, I actually don't think that what this conversation is necessary. Like what you've created here is something where it makes me feel like I don't understand. And in reality, I do understand, and it is more simple. Like in that conversation with Amir, I kept saying, what you are describing in my interpretation is, I don't understand, therefore God. And he had this reaction of like, you just boiled down everything I just said. But when we continued in that call, and we were in that call for like, I don't know, 40 minutes, that was what he was saying, was I don't understand, therefore God. And like, that's what it was pretty much the whole time.
I feel like I'm boring with it, but when someone says something like, you know, God can be eternal, but the universe can't, or whatever, there's nothing really more for me to say, because I just completely reject that. I just like, some of the things he was stating as like factual, I'm completely rejecting, and I don't agree. So it's hard to argue from there, because I'm not accepting his like the beginning part of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of boring, but like, I'm just like on my end, but I'm just kind of like, I reject that. Therefore, I don't really take it further than that, because I reject it to begin with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when people try to explain the existence of the Catholic God, and then they use, or Christian God, and they use the Bible. Like, it's like, well, hang on. Because of course, wait, it's like there's a meme that I think Promise created, and it's like a surge protector, so it has like all of the outlets, and it's plugged into itself.
We were talking about how somebody needs to keep that on hand.
Yes, we do, because that's what it feels like. It's like, talk about circular reasoning. What are we talking about? Anyway.
Hello, and that was, if I had to say, probably the worst clip I have ever seen on the line. Frankly, that was terrible, because they say a lot of facts, but we have alternative facts on our side. Now, do remember that if you are seeing me next to some woman who, frankly, not impressed, but if she were to laugh, that would be an endorsement of me, Donald Trump. A laugh is an endorsement, so do not smile or your face will crack. Don't do it. You can't do it. Okay, I really thought she would break by now, so it's kind of ruining the bit I'm trying to do here. But you can like, you can subscribe. Oh, there it is. She endorsed me.